Hey, welcome back to Let's Animate. We're jumping ahead here in our project of 30 seconds of The Force Awakens, and we're now on the reveal of Mr. Disney himself, Mickey Mouse. Mickey Mouse will be situated in this throne right here, and this will be just about the final scene of our little 30-second parody of Star Wars The Force Awakens from like 3 years ago. Anyway, I already laid some groundwork here, set the scene up a little bit in terms of the angle we're approaching everything at, how I want everything to look. I found a fairly attitude. That's going to be the face, more the smile. I'll be looking at the smile here. Is this being sort of the final finish smile when he starts to clap? When we first encounter Mickey, he's just going to be this sort of attitude, and no one's really going to know what to make of the attitude, and he's just suddenly going to break into a slow clap, which kind of puts everyone, it visibly lifts the weight out of the room. It opens the window, and all the weight in the room just goes out. Mickey has given his approval, and Star Wars The Force Awakens, as it has become known, will be a tracing, the result of J.J. Abrams tracing over the original beloved A New Hope. And if you recall from our last very subdued, I don't even know if the audio turned out on that episode, we had these sort of half-cocked sort of Easter egg ideas that I could not come up with better cliched sequels. I'm going to have to do some thinking on that over the weekend, I think, and maybe try to fix this and make this work. Because I think a couple of little Easter eggs in here. I like this Chewie has Papa's question mark going. Luke flies a rascal needs a lot of work. Maybe something like Luke hip surgery or something. I need not very wordy, funny, cliched sequel ideas. What is something that always happens in sequels that is so cliched, right? Some cliche to the fact that these people are older. I don't know. I like where my head is going with this, but whether or not you're going to get those short, few-word descriptions that highlight the complicated fact that it's a rip on the idea of sequels being derivative. It's kind of hard in a few words, Easter egg dropping in the back of this overall scene. But I'm going to try it, and then it might not fly. It might fly. Who knows, right? We're going to see how it goes. So let's just work on, for now, finishing this throne. I had a little bit of texture here. This is something you're not going to be able to see, but this filled in area here is actually given sort of a soft edge look, so that it is it looks like this chair is dimpled and creased and has some interesting light stuff going on with the texture of it. And we're just going to copy and paste these across the rest of the chair. Looks about right. And then position them here. And this will be Mickey's home for this particular scene. Probably only need to go that far, I guess. What does the rest of it look like? Yeah, it's got a interesting base. I'm going to try to work a Disney logo. Maybe that's what we'll work on for the bulk of this episode. I found myself, and this is not original, I mentioned this in the last episode, and I knew then that it wasn't original, but I'm going to talk about it anyway, because I found myself having to pry myself away from these Joe Rogan podcasts, and I mean, I always knew that he did a podcast, and looking back in some of the videos, it seems like he's been doing this for years, which when I think about it makes sense, because when I first heard about the Joe Rogan Experience was quite a while ago, and I just never brought myself to listen to it. And some of the stuff that I'm hearing is fascinating, and it's the one sort of caveat in all that I was surprised about, that I just actually turned off midway through about an hour ago, was the episode, or one of the episodes. I'm not sure if there's been more than one, but it's about a year old now, with Neil deGrasse Tyson. And I was shocked at how little I enjoyed it. And I was trying to think why. I liked what they were talking about. I liked Joe Rogan and the guest individually, but for some reason, Neil deGrasse Tyson on the podcast just didn't translate for me. And it's the strangest thing to try to discuss that I maybe shouldn't have tried to bring it up in this video. If I can't, I'm already having trouble putting coherent thoughts together, but it was very strange to have that sensation where the individual topics were great, individually they were great, but just it did not translate well as a guest. And I might give it a second chance, or at least parts of it a chance, the parts that I skipped, and go back and give them a chance. But I mean, there's just so much content on that channel that who knows if that'll actually be possible for me. But I'm not adverse to the idea of that anyway. But yeah, I was shocked because I was looking forward to that. I thought for sure it'd be a slam dunk, no brainer that would be a great episode. Because and I don't know what it was, and I think where it started for me for some reason, and I think it was Neil deGrasse Tyson's not fault, but I think it started with him because they were talking about an old Twilight Zone episode, and I'm old enough that Twilight Zone is like, I remember that you'd stumble across those in repeats as a kid. I'm not so old that I saw the original, but like when it was originally aired. But finding those in repeats, by chance, back in the 90s, late 90s, I guess, was huge for me, and there was nothing else. Well, I shouldn't say there was nothing else like it on TV, because there was, in a way, like all the shows that it inspired were still on. I think when I was of that age, the reboot of a very similar show called The Outer Limits was in its original run, its original reboot run. That is, the 90s version of The Outer Limits was in its original run right around that time. So you would think that would scratch the itch, but I just have this massive nostalgia boner, I guess, and the black and white, the tone of the show, the Twilight Zone was just, that was gold. There was nothing like that on, that sort of nostalgia factor on at the time, and so that was a huge find to stumble across. And again, this is back in the day where you couldn't just hit a guide or go online and see what was coming up when you could catch a show and then record it or whatever, right? This was, if you happen to find it, or if it was in, you happen to have, TV Guide, I guess. You might not even know what episode it was. It just said Twilight Zone, half an hour. And you'd be like, oh my God, I got to set up the VCR to record this, or I've got to stay up and watch this. And I don't even remember when I first started watching them, to be honest with you. Like, I'm trying to, I know I was fairly young when I first saw them, but when I'm trying to think of my setup, right? Like, was I staying up late on the couch in the living room TV, or did I have my own TV in my bedroom at that time? I can't remember. And it's kind of odd for me, because I know I remember watching the famous one, which really isn't one of my favorites, but I know it's one of the more famous ones, where the spoiler alert but it's a famous episode where the aliens turn out to be trying to eat everybody, right? They come up with a book. Oh yeah, we live by this book, and it's called To Serve Man. Okay, or To Serve Man, or Serving Man? To Serve Man. That's the name of the episode. And then you slowly, and of course, maybe we'll get to that later. But and of course you come to realize, or the characters come to realize, that it's actually a cookbook, right? And it's a play on the words to serve man. We're happy to think, or the characters in the show versions of us, we're happy to think that it was to serve us because, you know, they come with all this great technology and teach us all these things, like they are serving us. And then of course it's no, to serve you, like at the dinner table, right? So their goal is to eat humans. Oh, and this big reveal, and then it's too late because the guy's already getting on the spaceship, and the lady's yelling from the crowd, "No, Jim, it's a cookbook!" Do. And then the big dramatic sci-fi, you know, Twilight Zone chords ring out. The strings, it was probably strings, I don't know for sure, but let's just assume it was the strings bellow or screech in that sort of haunting way. And it's like, and then the cheesy UFO effects sound off, and they blast into space, and poor Jim is probably going to be one of the first humans eaten by these aliens. And I was going to say earlier was that I think probably a lot of my Twilight Zone experience, and maybe the true for a lot of people who may ever eventually maybe someday listen to this, a lot of my experience came from The Simpsons. And The Simpsons, you know, spoofing on a lot of classic media, introduced me to a lot of those things. And, you know, of course, everybody knows, any Simpsons fan knows the Halloween episodes, and they were rife with plots taken directly from the Twilight Zone. And blending those two, you know, the current take on those stories that Twilight Zone inspired, not even a take, a lot of times it's very, very much just the plot that is being shown as original in those shorter seasonally themed Halloween episodes. And we, a lot of us, had the advantage, I guess. I don't know if it is an advantage, or I mean, it's the only thing we know, so there's no way to really tell, but of seeing both sides. You get introduced to the tribute, and then later, probably, or at least maybe simultaneously, you're watching the reruns of the Twilight Zone. You can see the two very close together, and that was an amazing experience growing up as a kid to see those tributes, and maybe that has led to a lot of the media properties that I enjoy now. I was talking before about how I like the reboots and the maturation of classic. Is this gonna look all right? It's better to do it like this than in text, I guess. And why I like the maturation of classic media is because I grew up in the age of reruns, right? I grew up in the age of, you know, my classic shows being heavily inspired by those. They're the creators' classic shows, you know, Twilight Zone and The Simpsons, and having both of those at the same time really made me the media consumer that I am today, and now, hopefully, as I continue to do this, the media creator that I am today. What is this from? Is that on the chair layer? It is on the chair layer. I must have made this just as an original blob. I don't think we need that at all. So what should we put this on? We might have to put this on like a white background, eh? Probably. I'm gonna say probably, because otherwise I don't think it's really going to stand out at all. I'll just throw this to the back of that layer, and then oh boy, what do we do with it now? It just becomes a box that the logo lives in? I don't know. Fuck. I'm not intentionally not swearing. Yeah, that's no good. That's trash. I'm not intentionally not swearing. I am trying to keep things a little bit more PG than I keep my normal life, and a little bit more PG than I keep my than the media that I actually consume. if I had the no holds barred kind of approach, I could take. I mean, I'd be all over the place. I'm not this reserved at all. This is taking a conscious effort. I'm not gonna say a lot of effort, but it's taking a conscious effort to not just be dropping f-bombs and making any kind of innuendos and suggestions that some people might be used to and might be more familiar with. But this is meant as just a very, very chill, very relaxed, laid back kind of activity for me. And if I start getting myself worked up and get the blood pumping and the attitude flying and the f-bombs dropping and we may come to that, and there may be episodes like that in the future, but for right now I am making a conscious effort to just keep things chill, keep things laid back, and it's more about a calming experience than a really ramp you up kind of experience. But I gotta tell you, a lot of the topics that have been coming up in listening to some of these, and the reason how I ended up actually onto the Joe Rogan podcast was not with the intention of finding a new podcast or the advice of anybody else, that I just finally decided, okay, yeah, it's time to watch this guy's show. But somehow I ended up, it started with clips of Jordan Peterson. He's the Canadian, he's in my province that I know, Ontario, is or was university teacher, prof, person there, and got into a whole lack of hot water. And as I went through this, I thought maybe intentionally, well, certainly intentionally. I mean, he made some statements and took a stand on some Canadian legislation around transgender identities and pronoun use, which he equated with free speech. And then, of course, then you're on the YouTube spiral by then. I am, so to speak, and it sort of all his other opinions come out, and there's clips of his lectures, and there's clips of him trying to talk with I don't want to say protesters, but people expressing very loudly their opposition to some of his thoughts and some of his vocalizations, and they're trying to have debates and talk. And so I'm in that spiral of going from, very subdued clips of him giving a lecture to this uproar of him being put on the defensive in the face of some pretty upset youth, and to everything in between. And so where in the actual timeline all this stuff falls, I don't know. But in the end, it seemed like by the time I finished that part of my spiral, the Jordan Peterson part of the spiral, seemed like, oh, he's promoting a book? I'm like, was this after the fact? Was this just something he did after to deal with? Because it's at one point it seemed like he was going to be, relieved of his position with the university. I don't know whatever happened with that. And then in another clip, it's like, oh, and he's promoting a new book, and I'm like, oh no, don't tell me this guy that I just thought had some pretty salient points was doing this as part of a media storm. And I don't know if that is the case, and I would suspect that it's not, because I also saw a clip of him, I think, addressing the Senate, or I don't know, I'm ignorant in that, I apologize. But I mean, you don't go into a political discussion like that, I don't think, if all you're trying to do is promote your book. There are better ways to promote your book. So I believe he stands behind what he was saying. And a lot of it made sense. I mean, anything makes sense if you can approach it in a calm, respectful manner. You can understand other viewpoints and things like that. I consider myself a pretty left-leaning, liberal sort of person, and in some of these clips he just tears into that mindset. And I don't know, I'm just babbling on here as I try to come up with something that is going to make this logo look not so out of place. But yeah, so there was a big part of my Jordan Peterson spiral, and there were some clips of him on the Joe Rogan show podcast. So I watched those. Okay, yeah, that's fine, good enough. Joe Rogan, I mean, he's pretty two well-spoken people, expressing their thought. It was great. No issues at all. Then somehow I ended up one of the clips on YouTube as the spiral process goes, and I ended up listening to this Ben Shapiro guy out of the States. I might have heard the name before, but never heard him speak. Never really got into what he represented or what he stood for. Just lumped him in with the rest of American politics and the American social issues going on, and assumed he was part of the right, and he was probably very well off, and I have all those stereotypes that get promoted about American social and political scene that I'm sure many of us do, and I just probably had him filed somewhere in the back of my brain as American on the right, outspoken, maybe a little bit of a more talk than substance kind of guy. And then watching these clips and seeing how well spoken he is, how very clear, very calm, respectful, at least in the clips that I have seen, was impressive. And I went on a spiral of some of his clips and highlights and his being exposed to some of his views, a lot of which, again, when you make a point in a calm, it comes off as right. I mean, and I don't know if this is a sign of me being, easily influenced maybe, but views that I never thought I would see myself supporting come off as not so crazy after all. I'm not saying that I'm one way or the other, especially on American. I don't have, a vested interest in American politics, so to speak. I find it entertaining, as I'm sure a lot of people do, and interesting, but I never take a stance on the issue. I bring it up as a conversation piece or a neat little thought experiment. I don't subscribe one way or the other in American politics anyway. And I like the exchange of ideas. I like ideas being expressed in a way that gives me an opportunity to take them in, toss them around in my head a little bit, see what I like, see what I don't like, enjoy it, and then move on. That kind of stuff I love, and these podcasts and these speakers that I've been listening to have given me that, and they're new ideas. I'm not just surrounding myself with the typical liberal stuff anymore. Not that that's all that I did before, but again, they are offering right now to me some stuff that I wasn't always getting before, just a chance to just listen to something new, right? A lot of the stuff that was going on in politics, it's just rehashed. I mean, we've heard all this stuff before. These people are bad. It's bad to think this way. If you say this, you're that. And you hear this stuff all the time, and you start to lose interest. And it's like, I want to be interested in something again. Give me something to be interested in. I'm not going to fight for you, or I'm not gonna get up and stand behind you on any of this by any means, but just give me something I can listen to and toss around, and in hearing this stuff, learn a little bit about myself too, and what I like and don't like about what you're saying, and what I like and don't like about what someone else is saying, and of course you got to account for bias in the way this stuff is presented, especially on YouTube. Is just ridiculous. These very right-leaning channels that the worst is when they put some text up over the content that they're showing, and that drives me crazy. But it's just listening in the background mostly, and again, new ideas, new thoughts, things that you might not have surrounded yourself with before. Just expose yourself. You don't have to jump in wholeheartedly. Take it in, wrestle with it, let it wash around in your body a little bit. You should be, if you're not strong enough to know what you're listening to, and maybe reject the parts that are a little bit more outrageous that you don't believe in, then maybe if you can't do that, take it easy, but there is stuff out there that you can listen to that will challenge you, make you be a stronger thinker, a clearer, more decisive thinker and speaker, and it can only help you in the long run. Listening, there's no harm in listening, and that's what I've been doing a lot of lately, is listening to new stuff. And what we're going to be doing a lot of in the future is working on this Mickey Mouse. We're going to get some ears down. We're going to get some facial expressions going on. We're going to place him in this chair. We're really going to start to see this come to life. I don't know what I'm going to do up here with these. I kind of like the idea of the horns. If I look at the rendering, though, that doesn't show up because it's outside the magical blue box. But we're going to take a look at what we're going to do. Life is coming into this project more and more. It will be done eventually. But until then, thanks very much. See you soon.